It's not quite This Week in XR, but we're doing a special panel today for our friends at Zapper.
What I do hold on to is how even the very, very simplest experiences still brings a smile to everybody's face who sees it. And sometimes I think we also get really carried away with just the, how amazing and ambitious and complex things can be. But the beautiful simplicity of people's natural reaction to seeing augmented reality, that hasn't faded or diminished at all.
XR's really not about the hardware and the optics. It's about the neuroscience of the mind. And when I started to go there, I realized how immensely difficult this ultimately will be, but how immensely wonderful it would be.
All of us who've been in virtual reality and other types of computer-mediated realities, not been in it for the money. We've been in it because we're chasing the magic, because we believe in the immense power of humans to surpass the problems and transcend conflict and using new ways of computing and communications to do that. And that's where these technologies fit.
I'm very excited about where we're going, where we are with AI-controlled characters, giving artists the ability to create a personality in the way of the writer of a script does. You create a whole character, and to be able to create that character at a deeper level and to use all those things you've thought about, all that kind of action outside the frame gets to be baked into the character, and then you have this new way of living in a story rather than just telling it in a linear way.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to This Week in XR. This is Ted Shulowitz and Rony Abovitz. We are flying without our fearless leader, Charlie Fink, today because he's actually taking a well-deserved and well-overdue actual vacation. So he is going to be, I think, off the next couple weeks, and Rony and I will be taking the helm. So we just want to Rony and I were talking beforehand, we just want to make a reach out and thank all of our listeners and growing listeners, and the fact that you all share this with other friends in the industry. And we notice our listener count going up week over week into the many, many thousands now. And we appreciate it. And it's nice that you're liking our take on things, and how usually the three of us, and then we bring in a guest. This week we won't have a guest because of some travel coordination schedules between Charlie being out, me being in New Orleans all week at the Epic, what's called Unreal Fest, and also an executive summit just for our media and entertainment stuff. I've been busy and will be traveling tomorrow. So we can update you a little bit on that, but we've got a number of sort of news topics to go through. Next week we'll have a guest on. This week it's just me and Rony. So we're just going to talk for 30, 40 minutes about all the topical news that's out there. First of all, Rony, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
Doing good. Hey, Ted. And Charlie, sorry we miss you today.
Yeah, well, Charlie will be listening remotely when we post the podcast. I also ran into Lauren, who helps us on all the admin and coordination. She was here at the Epic Unreal Fest as well, so we got a chance to meet up in person and spend a little time together. So a little shout out to her for looking out for us week after week and making sure that all our people that listen to this all around the world get the media, get the material, both the audio on every podcast platform, and for those smaller number that watch our funny faces on YouTube on video, here we are recording. So that being said, let's dive into kind of last week's sort of major announcements. I think the biggest thing that a lot of people are talking about is the next generation of wearables that don't have a smart screen, that just like the glasses you're wearing, Rony, are normal glasses. They can be sunglasses, they can be regular glasses. They have outward-facing cameras, some sensors, and some audio, both input and output. So they're glasses that have speakers in them, so that you can hear without wearing headphones in your ear, which is nice. And the one that sort of made a lot of news last week was what was announced at the Meta conference, and we can talk about that as well because I was at the Meta conference as well. So as you might have noticed, for those that listen to the podcast a lot know, I went through some health stuff and I was kind of locked in my house for a little while recovering from some heart stuff, but now I am back out in the world and on the circuit again. So last week was Menlo Park with Meta. This week is New Orleans with Unreal, which is fun to be back and seeing everybody. Maybe you want to comment on the second gen glasses I got a chance to use them in person, and I've been a user of the first gen glasses, which I can tell you kind of fell off my radar pretty quickly. They didn't really offer a lot of value, but these new ones were very impressive. And by the way, and then I'll shut up and let you go into this a little bit. The woman who gave the presentation on stage about the new Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses was really fantastic. She was a standout. I think I mentioned it last week on the podcast because I was just coming from the event. She was so passionate, so well thought, and so excited about her product and the product team that she's working on that it was infectious. So it was nice to see. I'm sure the video is posted online of it if you want to watch it. So what do you think about these things? And because there's a big topic that I haven't even touched about why these things are so important that you might want to go into.
Yeah, and Ted, like maybe quickly, just like as you take like what all the pieces of what I think the device that everyone will wear one day, the billions of people, and you sort of like de-feature pieces of it and reassemble it in all these different form factors.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of all these different modules, like no screen but an AI, and you wear it as a pin. No screen, but it looks like glasses, but has a microphone and speakers and has a camera. So all these like weird configurations. Like, what was your take on, I guess, the Ray-Ban 2 Meta, and what was interesting about it? Like, what did you like about it?
First of all, as you might expect from a second gen product, just like you went through with early prototype Magic Leaps to the Magic Leap 1 to then the Magic Leap 2, it's more nimble, it's better, it's lighter, the cameras are higher resolution, the audio quality is better, the speaker quality is better. So all the kind of first gen, barely good enough to be a product sort of things are largely starting to get figured out. The cameras are resolution enough; they're better. The 3D interpolation is better. The way the UI is better. Like everything's just better, and it's considerably lighter and more comfortable. Like they don't squeeze on your head quite as much, and everything got better. So the SoC system, they put more money and time into it. But the big thing that isn't actually part of the initial shipping of the Ray-Ban 2, let's call them, smart glasses, is that they have the ability through those front-facing cameras to contextualize, read the world, and use an AI system. One of the many large language models, of course, Meta is one of those with Llama and Llama 2, to actually look at objects with the glasses you're wearing and say, hey, Meta, what is this object? Hey, Meta, can you tell me how to get from point A to point B? Hey, Meta, is this something safe to eat? Which, of course, brings up all kinds of legal and ethical considerations. If you ask your glasses, should I eat this, and it gives you food poisoning, who's responsible for that, right? So there's all kinds of sort of thought process around this. But the idea of where these things go in their current form is pretty interesting. And I'm curious your take on it, because I think you were very early in this as well, trying to figure out contextual reading of what the world would be through your glasses, right?
Yeah, like I always thought that spatial computing would have sensors that look at the world, look at you, the sound, but also like very high quality display, so that it all would come together. It feels like what they're doing is um, testing a piece of what a future all day, everyday AR wearable will be without the optics yet.
Right.
And for someone who's sort of like seeing the end game, it's like a little hard for me to want to wear something like that. But I'm wondering, people may want to take baby steps in. Are the baby steps worth it? Like, here, the question I have is, are we turning people into the Neil Stephenson gargoyle from
Yeah.
Snow Crash? And what I mean by that, if you haven't read the book, and please read the book. It's a great book. If you haven't read
Definitely
Snow
read the
Crash.
book. It's
I can't believe you're listening to our podcast. You haven't
and
read
not
Snow
reading the
Crash.
book. Yeah, it's a very meaningful book for all of us.
But
Yeah.
I know why Meta wants people to wear these, because you're a walking scanner,
Right.
integrating like your focus and attention into their AI system and into their data.
Yeah, it's
Which
almost like
they'll
Elon. It's almost Elon. Why does he really want you to drive Teslas? Sure, he's happy to make money selling Teslas, but he's already the richest guy on the planet. What he really wants is to map the world with those devices that are moving around planet Earth, right? And then, push it out to satellite data, push it out to all kinds of other things.
And it's priced at such a low price that I don't think they're even covering their cost of goods. What's really doing is they're subsidizing you as a data AI generator for them to make all this money off of you later,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
And the question is like, what's the value? I know the value to Meta and to other players who are not all about your privacy, but it's all about using what you stream back to them in all these different ways. Um, what's the value to the user? Like you played with it. So as a user, knowing that a lot of your data is going to create revenue for them, what are you getting back?
Right. So uh, before I answer that, obviously one of the most valuable tropes that we all use in the tech industry is if you can't exactly figure out what's going on with the product, how they're selling it so cheaply, why they're giving all these advanced capabilities away for free in the sense of Google, well, the answer is you are the product, right? You are
I
the
think you
human
are the
data
product
field.
here again. I think you are the product, right? It's
Yeah.
like you are a walking biologic robot sending signals back to Meta. But I keep wondering, like, what's your value back? Is it
Yeah.
do you really feel like when you were wearing it, do you feel like I'm getting enough value back that I'm willing to trade my location, my attention, my awareness, all the things I like, everything I experience in my daily life, give it to them to do whatever they're going to do with in exchange for something, right? Is that something worth it?
Well, and I think if we look at the very broad space of computing and that trade off, right? That trade off of computers for what they do are extraordinarily inexpensive and powerful. The trade off is all those data fields become you becoming the data input device, right? And if we talk about Meta, Apple, Google, Apple or Amazon and a couple of others battling for the ownership of the next computer interface and what humans do with it. This is effectively part of that strategy, right? So for starting price of $300, you get these pretty fancy schmancy smart glasses that can track you in the real world. Now, their instant obviousness of value is outside of that kind of you're a human data portal. Is you get these really cool, stylish Ray-Bans that have audio built in. If you're a social media person and you want to capture things, you can snap it with your glasses without taking your phone out. It'll do automatic posting. The other big thing they talked about is it will live cast events. So everybody becomes this sort of massive media machine, and it's kind of interesting to see where that goes, which could lead us, unless you want to kind of keep drilling down into this, could lead us into the next story that I want to talk about that made some news, which is a small startup from some of the folks that designed and built the iPhone, a company called Humane. But if you want to sort of
Yeah,
round out
well,
the idea of the Ray-Ban, we can go into the next step of the equation here.
yeah, perfect bridge. Just to close that out, Google Glass had the exact same premise of streaming and this AI data collection, and Sergey jumping out of an airplane, and then Evan at Snap with Specs. It's the exact same premise,
Right.
cool, and it's all the same story. So I think it's an interesting thing, like this lower end market where are you getting enough value of like wearing a camera without a screen and the mics, maybe with some AI it'll be there. But what's interesting is like that form factor, which is going to be communicating with AI. That's one of the value props. Like it's an Alexa type thing on your face and glasses.
Hmm.
I think Humane is the exact same proposition, except I'm wearing it as a pin.
Right. So let's back up a step. So this is a startup, a fairly young startup, but they've raised, I think, over $200 million, and they are planning on releasing a product, I guess, this year. In
November.
in a month, we'll
Yep.
see, right? Before the end of the year. And so they've raised a significant amount of capital. They've been fairly stealthy about what they're doing and how they're doing it, which is kind of interesting. But there's a certain very personal appeal to this approach to me as someone, and you know, Rony, that I've been sort of vocal about my um, I guess disdain's not the right word, but my lack of interest in many social platforms, right? I find them an intrusion on my day. I find them sort of taking away some of the joy of my daily life and the humanity of connecting with others. And I like to pick and choose the platforms I want to use to reach out and connect with people. And I like you're a Medium user. We text between you, me, and Charlie. We certainly use old-fashioned email, and will dabble in LinkedIn occasionally, but it's not my favorite platform. It's too intrusive, and I know others are sort of making bones on me, and I don't love that. Right? I love the idea of what these folks seem to be professing is it's time to get back to a less sort of absorption of the compute system all the time and into something a little more humane, which is why they talk about it that way. So I would likely be a good early test user for this if it functions and does what it might do. But it's still pretty stealthy. Although you seem to know a little bit about where you think they're going, right?
Yeah, first of all, I think there's some MIT projects 10, 15 years ago that were playing around with a similar idea and projecting out. But from what I understand, it has location awareness, cameras and sensors, audio awareness. So it seems to be able to capture and track all the same things you might be worried about.
Yeah,
But they're just calling it, they're branding it in a kinder,
and
gentler way.
it's
But it
kind of
is,
rejiggering it. Yeah,
yeah, but
and
it can't function if it isn't capturing all those data
right,
streams
exactly.
and feeding it to the AI in the same way. It's just in a pretty package. So I think there's a question of like, what are they really doing, and how's it getting paid for? I think that's one. The other question is like the iPhone is such a powerful form factor. It works, it covers so many things. Are you willing to leave your iPhone behind
Right.
and walk around with the Humane pin? That's going to be the fundamental question because it isn't part of the Apple ecosystem. It's not like phone, watch, tablet, like they've really got you locked in. Are you going to abandon that and have this thing on? And the Alexa was successful because it fit into the Amazon ecosystem.
Sure.
What I do wonder about here, are they just waving a flag like somebody buy us, Google, Apple, somebody buy us? Because if they're not, and I think that's why hardware is so hard, what is the ecosystem that ties into all these other pieces that allows it to flourish? Like this is the perfect moment. Like Nest got bought by Google,
Hmm.
right? Oculus got bought by Meta. Like these kind of companies ideally are taken out by someone just around now.
Right. And
But
that seems to be a fairly consistent theme with you. If you go back and listen to a lot of our podcasts historically, you are very much professing on a fairly regular basis that many startups, their only track to commercial success is to be absorbed by one of the big ones, by the Borg, as it were. And I've listened to a number of things. There's actually a great podcast I'd recommend. It's somewhat historic, called Land of the Giants. That is one of the Vox podcasts that talks about the first season's all about Amazon. Second season, I think, or third is about Netflix, which is fascinating to me working in the entertainment business. Third, I know, is about Google. The last and most current season is all about Tesla. And there's kind of like a lot of this inside story, inside baseball stuff about how these things really happen. And, when you think they're not so nefarious, they're pretty nefarious. And Amazon is one that kind of really punches all around and grabs things up and stifles a lot of innovation. And your only path out is to be absorbed, right?
well, let's say it works. Let's say Humane One generates some interest. What really stops an Apple from making their version of that fit
Sure.
into the ecosystem at with all the other Apple bells and whistles and integrations? And what stops Google and their ecosystem from doing that, or Samsung or LG? That's unfortunately what some of the pioneering hardware companies become. The example and test guinea pig for others to learn and see where people react. Go, all right, we like that. Team, go do it with immense scale, funding, capital, supply chain, and marketing and branding that are billions of dollars. So I think it's exciting that someone's testing a new form factor.
Yeah.
If you think on the product side, we'll see how people work with it. But if it works, I do wonder, how do they survive? Because this feels like something that, if it is good, Apple would make their own.
Right.
What really stops Apple from like taking a sensor and their AI integration and their networks and their ecosystem going, this is just an add-on thing you put on your shirt and have the phone in your pocket, and you still get to use the phone when you need it.
Yeah, if it gets traction, Apple will pay attention, and they will eventually lock in and apply the Apple polish and use the Apple silicon and all the trillions of dollars of market cap that they have to do that. I think one of the interesting things about this device, which is yet to be, I think, fully confirmed, although a lot of people are predicting it, is that in addition to the wearable and giving you audio cues, it will have some sort of little micro high intensity projector that you will hold your hand out in front of it, and it will give you that micro contextual information, not super graphically rich or super graphically interesting, nothing like what a Magic Leap would do, a bit more like what the North glasses would do, or even the original Google Glass with
But on your hand.
but on your hand. If that works, and maybe Apple would adopt it. And I think when you talk about the overall tack of Apple as a company, and I know I've been somewhat public and talked about this, and I think you agree, Apple doesn't particularly. Apple's strength is not innovation. Apple's strength is watching other companies sort of stumble around with product ideas and product categories, and then go, I think we can do that too, and we can probably do it better, or at least more targeted to our ecosystem and our user understanding, which is what you see with the Vision Pro, right? They are certainly not the first company to build a virtual reality or mixed reality headset by far. But many people are thinking, well, maybe this is the right chemistry because they have the kind of capital to push the needle, right? And this might be a perfect example of Humane gets a certain stage of the equation, and then Apple goes, "Nice job, kids. Now the adults will take over, and we'll see what we can do."
Or weirdly, Charlie, maybe this is maybe it's an enterprise thing, like a UPS truck driver. So they're hands free, and they're like, "Am I at the right address?" And it goes, "Yes." Like it could be like sort of functional, contextual things like that. But I don't know if it's the fashion models. They have the fashion model branding right now, but maybe it's the UPS driver, the nurse who's like looking at a drug regimen. I think people experiment with it. I think it's gonna be cool and interesting. I do wonder in the world of like the watch and the phone and the tablet and some kind of sleek wearable AR, and also the bigger, heavier VR, is this going to find a place? Or can you say, you know what, I get everything they're trying to give me out of my watch.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be interesting. Like, can the watch just simply give you all the contextual information? And even if it worked, Apple with a little projector you spray onto your hand off a watch. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Right, and you got caught into the Charlie Ted reading my my Zoom thing because I
sorry.
use Charlie's.
Well, you're Charlie.
When he's not here, we log in.
Yeah, it's like anyone who is the leader of the podcast is Charlie.
It's classic. I love it.
There's tail end Charlie and front end Charlie.
Exactly. I'll channel my inner Charlie. A couple other stories that are interesting. We always touch on AI in some way, shape, or form week over week now because it is such a hot topic. The thing that got a little bit of buzz this week is a bit on the negative side of AI. We often talk about what could possibly go wrong. This week, and I'm sure there are a lot of other groups that are getting. I just need to turn that off so it doesn't keep pinging. Getting a lot of sort of touch point around this in a negative way. But the story that came out was Mr. Beast, who is of course one of the biggest, if not the biggest YouTuber on the planet, and Tom Hanks both got deep faked this week. Mr. Beast got deep faked in people thinking that he was giving away $2 iPhones to anybody that would click on a link, which of course probably led you to some place you didn't want to go. And Tom Hanks apparently was like promoting dental insurance or something, which, and both of these things, of course, they had to come out publicly and go, I have nothing to do with this. I'm a victim of my celebrity. I'm a victim of who I look like in the world. And because they can do a voice sim quite easily and a face sim quite easily and a lip translation quite easily now with technology, this is a classic what could possibly go wrong scenario. And that's just two examples of likely many, many thousands of people that are being, sort of used incorrectly.
Well, Charlie, it's really great you brought that up because one, this is a.
If you keep calling me Charlie, I'm going to start having a complex.
Charlie and Ted, you're just going to be both. No, you're as leaders anyway. So Ted, the interesting thing here is that a friend of mine is the CEO of a major company overseas in Europe. I won't go into detail. He and his team are going all out to solve this problem. This problem of deepfake and how do you know that someone's voice or video is authentic and real and grounded and certified. I thought it was very fascinating. I won't go into any details. They had me look and give them some thoughts on it and why it was important. But if you just think about the use cases, like celebrities, politicians, anyone who wants to say that this video, this thing that I wrote or said is true and real and came from me. And is certified in the same way that maybe like a bank transfer
right.
Has this like validation certification. I feel like that's going to be critical in our digital future. And let's say like trust, and then you'll have all this nonsense stuff that you'll know because it has no certificate and doesn't have like whatever is that set of things that makes it valid is not real.
Yeah, well, if you think about it through the lens of some of the biggest, highest valuation companies in the tech world, they're cybersecurity companies, right? Palo Alto, Fortinet, these companies, and it's that sort of battle of the good guys versus the bad guys, and they basically function in a way that they're designed as the protector, but they're also an enabler, right? It's like you give the reason to need all of this infrastructure, and big companies have to spend all this money on cybersecurity. To your point, is this startup going to be something that in and of itself becomes an economic driver? Because clearly they're probably not doing it as a nonprofit. They want to do it to benefit something. So this is one of these societal sort of spirals, right, where the good guys and the bad guys. Although I guess historically we've always had humans, good guys and bad guys. That I guess that's why we get good superhero
Yeah,
movies.
Ted, the antivirus platforms, you wonder, do they secretly release, digital viruses? You need
Mhm.
more of their antiviruses. But look, we're at a point where this is going to have some kind of really intense moments, and the need for this sort of, anti-counterfeiting, anti-forgery, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Like currency has now complex weaving and inks and holographic film, because people got so good at forging. Now it's like a ridiculous process to make like a dollar bill or paper currency. Now the same thing in digital, and some of this has been solved, like how to really validate a digital thing, but not in media. But I imagine, like, Paramount, that you work with in Viacom, they're going to want to know that we put out a film
Yeah, of course.
or something, or a statement, or President Biden goes on and says something, that you're actually seeing the uninterrupted, uncorrupted thing he said,
Yeah.
not hacked by anybody.
Yeah. The problem with
Um,
the internet is with all those good intentions, the bad stuff gets out faster than the good stuff can be validated. And
yes.
most people are pretty lazy, and they'll just get a feed and, a link from their friends or something on social media. And before it gets corrected, in the old days, we're of a generation where news operations, when they make a mistake, would do a retraction, and they would put a serious amount of energy saying, we actually made an error. We need to correct it. We need to correct it publicly. These days, it's kind of like, somebody's got to let you know. And if you don't track it, it's a problem, right?
And
So this
Ted,
is
like,
a serious
that
problem.
was like 2015,
Yeah.
like, basically there were like there was an era where this sort of more genteel kind of journalism media was like less than 10 years ago,
Yeah.
where there was still that modicum. And where it's weird to see how we have lost something that was with us for a long time in just a few years.
Right. There's a couple of other interesting sort of stories of the week. The design platform Canva, right, which competes with Adobe. It's Some people like it, sort of hipper, more indie version of Adobe's type tool sets, and there's a number of companies doing this stuff. Google's getting into that game too, and others. But they are diving into a Gen AI sort of add-on, I guess, plug-in architecture to Canva that includes animation use cases from Runway, which is a startup that is using the OpenAI architecture, and has proven really interesting results. So that will compete with something called Adobe Firefly, which is out in the market now. So you're starting to see this kind of battle of corporate needs and cycles going into figuring out how these industries, well-defined industries of design and creation, things like Photoshop, Illustrator, and Canva, what they do, are starting to adopt these things and build these AI agents into them. So I'm curious what you think about that stuff.
No, it's first of all, it's very clear that Canva and Adobe would have to adopt it, because you got like true indies like Midjourney out there showing everyone up with really small teams and just making things very impressive. So it's like, how could you be in that world like an Adobe or Canva and suddenly be so far behind a Midjourney? So I think this was almost a forced have to happen, and with OpenAI and other things happening. But what it's going to do is create this in between period where artists are using these AI tools in interesting ways. And we're going to see how people and these like smaller AI functions live together.
Right.
But I think what's going to happen is now those artists are going to have to do a lot more, because you'll be able to create more faster. So probably the workload on them is going to increase, but the complexity level may not have decreased.
Yeah.
And they're not perfect either. It's like not quite what you needed. So it made something, and now you might spend even more hours fiddling around in Photoshop or whatever, fixing the thing that was almost there.
Almost right. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's gonna be we're in this interesting in between mushy period where it's like almost there. Like voice AI was almost there for 20 years, and then Alexa almost got it there even better, and now it's like maybe almost there. But
Right.
look, this is inevitable, And I think it leads to like much crazier things that happen near the end of the decade and into the 2030s. So I think we're gonna
Yeah.
see a lot more of this happening. This is gonna be like an all-out battle between all these players.
Yeah, I think because I've been at this Epic Games conference all week, and I've been sort of immersed in that world. And one of the things that came out for me as kind of a takeaway of the ability to just build things faster and faster and faster with more efficiency and more plugins and more sort of pre-built modules and things that you can just ask and it will do, and sort of no code or low code options around AI is I keep in my brain, I keep thinking about the terminology rapid prototyping, right? And the idea that AI in the one of the best use cases allows you to rapid prototype. In our world, in the Hollywood business, we call that storyboarding or iteration or creationism of like before we go out and spend the money to really shoot it and lock ourselves in, we prototype a lot of things. We get a feel for, will that shot work? Do we like that? What that will look visually with very crude tools, but now those tools via game engines are more and more sophisticated, almost to the point where we can get to kind of final pixel level in a real time environment, right? And it just keeps getting stronger and stronger. So the idea of all of these companies understanding the value of rapid prototyping and all the foibles of it, all the ideas of like, well, are you spending more time just letting the machine try and do it, and then you got to go in and give it the creative direction you want? It's an unknown, right? But we're seeing both sides of the equation and lots more power unlocking
Well,
really every
Ted,
month.
I totally agree with you, but where I think this is going, and I'm actually working on this too, so I'll be like
Yes, of
biased
course you
on
have
it.
to.
But I think what's growing is like this in between period of tools and people making themselves feel okay, and then I would say really radical expansion of what those tools and systems can do, to the point where, like Ted, you and three friends sit around over a weekend, and the end result is, you not only have a great script and a great storyboard, but you have a feature film with an amazing soundtrack
Mhm.
that not too far away from now, maybe it's 2028, maybe it's 2033, is about as good as something like any of the major studios would have made. And
Yeah.
then things are going to be like, okay, what just happened?
Well, and I
Um,
also think that, like, as YouTube started to flourish, you got kind of this sort of nugget culture, right? Where little nuggets of things started to resonate with different people in different ways. You realized how big an audience there could be for so many different kinds of content. And, the studios are constantly playing catch up to that. The idea that there's a huge world of humanity out there that wants all kinds of different things from their media and entertainment experiences and their gaming interactive experiences, right? And like for me, like some of these funky nuggets, like the AI creator that did the Wes Anderson stuff we talked about. We could go and did a pretend Lord of the Rings trailer and a pretend Star Wars trailer, and people go like, "I would totally go see that," And that's kind of this strange next generation of what YouTube taught us about the human condition and how we like to absorb content. The next big wave is really coming. I know you're kind of working on that too, on a very personal, intimate
but no,
basis.
you actually hit something really important, Ted, which is, um, these AI systems are probably going to create just billions and trillions of chunky nuggets, like you said, with
Mhm.
funky nuggets, which is kind of maybe that's protective of the professionals that make films or build very detailed worlds, because to go farther than the nugget, you have to have a conceptual thought and cohere it together. It's not just a string of 3-second videos. It's not just a bunch of images randomly. You have to have this very clear, Spielberg level understanding of what you want, and that is something that not everyone has the patience for, to put something together. So
Right.
I think the Twitchy crowd is just like boom, boom, boom. We'll make like little 3-second, 1-second things and spray them all over the place, and it'll have like this TikTok like audience, which is going to have its own market.
Sure.
But to build something like this is the next Close Encounters, or I just did something that feels as good as like the Avengers Infinity War, that requires coherent thought. Start to separate a lot of the creators from the ones who are willing to put in the time and patience, because the AI systems will be really fast, but you and your creative team have got to have that thinking process.
Right.
That separates. But it's going to be very interesting, because someone who has that, like a kid in college, 18 years old at like NYU Film School, could graduate and have made 4 or 5 amazing feature films instead of student films using these tools. And that's
Sure.
what's going to be very exciting. We'll find the next Scorsese and Spielberg's a lot more quickly.
Right. All right. I'm gonna say we're going to come up on our self-imposed 5-minute warning for all the listeners. So if you're listening to the podcast, and get ready in 5 minutes, we'll wrap up. So there's a couple other.
We got to hit Epic. We got to hit Meta 3. But anyway, keep going.
Okay. Yes. All right. So we'll hit Epic and Meta 3. So maybe we'll go 7 minutes. A couple of smaller stories, and I think it's important to, while we talk about the big stuff, it's always important to bring up a couple of smaller nuggets. And in Charlie's column that you'll see that'll come out in Forbes, like it does every week, he mentioned a couple of really cool things that I want to comment on. There's a small little startup called Animate Anything, which is a very, UGC consumer level product, simple web interface. You can grab some sort of primitives in an objects and push a few buttons and it will animate something for you. It's worth probably giving it a try and just seeing if it has any value to you in your world. It's called Animate Anything. Doesn't need, to build objects in Maya or Blender. It just will grab a human, grab a dog, grab a whale, grab whatever it is, and you can create the animation for it and sort of, procedurally animate. So there's a couple of YouTube videos you can go hunt down, just search for Animate Anything, and you'll find it, or Animate Anything 3D. And that's kind of clever and interesting. We always keep an eye on UGC. And then lastly, in the smaller but interesting nuggets, if you live in Los Angeles or visiting Los Angeles, there's a free, which is nice. Let's see, is it really free or not? Who's gathering our data? Grand Avenue, which is sort of downtown Los Angeles. You can take a virtual AR tour of Grand Avenue, augmented by holding up your phone and looking at art forms get created. It's an interesting kind of modern art form. I think, Rony, guys like you and me are always looking for, when does that get much more immersive as opposed to the little kind of magic window slice of holding your phone up to a real object in the real world. But it looks pretty interesting, and when I get back home, I look forward to kind of checking it out. So those are the sort of smaller nuggets that are worth checking out. And then let me just, what are your questions about the Quest 3, since I'm, I guess, one of the few people that have gotten my eyes on it and used it, and your questions about Epic, because I was here this week.
Well, I think for all of our listeners who are waiting with bated breath, the Quest 3 is Mark's response to Apple Vision Pro. Mm-hmm. I think they have a price point designed to cut the legs out of Apple, and there's hazy information about what's the exact resolution. Now, you have to be one of the currently small number of people who have theoretically tried both.
Yeah.
So when you think about weight, visual clarity, functionality, as Meta closed the gap, are they bringing you something for what, $499 that Apple's selling for over $3,000? That's really going to get people to scratch their heads, or is the Vision Pro so much better? Meta still has a lot of catch up to do.
Right. So obviously, you and our listeners know I have to be just like your world, where you sometimes have to be a little careful about
what the Vision Pro is. It's out there and just developers.
Sure. So there's a lot of people that have seen it and talked about it, and that's exciting. In terms of the Quest 3, which, because you and I did a long go back 4 or 5 episodes, you and I did a long discussion about the Apple Vision Pro, and you can get an hour of just that in the heat of the moment there. But the Quest 3 is kind of in some ways, because of its moment in time right now, extremely relevant. You're talking about a device that's, call it, between $500 and $700. I actually think, as much as I think you're partially right that the Quest 3 is a little bit the answer to Apple's device, I think it's truthfully more the answer to the mostly failed attempt at the Quest Pro. That the Quest Pro had some right things in it, but it didn't have the right price point. It didn't have the right ergonomics. It had a lot of sort of challenges, and they learned where they really fit as a company is to be at that juncture of consumers and enthusiasts. And the Quest 3 is really good. It's interestingly slightly heavier than a Quest 2, but because of the pancake optics, you get the device closer to your head, so the pull down effect is far less. The camera tracking is good. The mixed reality component is not like off the charts, like blow your mind. but it's better than many other devices, and for that price point, it's extraordinarily good. And I think with software updates, it'll get better. Remember, we see early pre-release stuff of this, so it may not even be at final software. But I got a chance to do a number of different experiences in it, and we're obviously working on a development front with those guys on lots of different things. I'm quite enthused by that device. I think a lot of people will use it for a lot of different things and a lot of different verticals. I think maybe the most important ones are the things that Charlie and I and you talk about a lot, is not necessarily just the gaming stuff or the social stuff, but all the industrial use cases of a low cost device that has, and the fidelity is quite good. I mean, you're talking about an image quality with slightly over 2K per eye, and what they call sort of angled pixels, so that the screen door effect is highly minimalized and almost nothing. Like, you can really watch video on this thing and enjoy it, which I think is kind of a first, certainly for a device at that price point. We've seen much more exotic devices that can do it now with higher density displays. It'll be interesting to see the delta between, a device that's many thousands of dollars versus hundreds of dollars, and what really makes the difference for most users.
But Ted, when you switch between, let's say, a Vision Pro and that, when everyone has the opportunity to do that, like let's say in 2024, both are out there available.
Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be like one's a Mercedes, one's a Chevy, or is it going to be closer?
Um, it's an interesting way to process that information. I think one is a really, really good Toyota and one is a Ferrari. I think that's the difference. I think,
Okay.
like the car that's exceptionally good at doing, everything at a fairly low price point, and is the car that many people have around the world, versus an extremely exotic device. But I think Apple always kind of figures the way to cut into that over time. Right? I mean, we've all adopted, certainly, in the West mostly, a device that's relatively expensive for our mobile compute, right, in our pocket. That's, I mean, a lot of people are very comfortable spending between $1,500 and $1,700 on a new device, whether it's just built into their monthly plan or they pay it outright. So I think, when Apple gets probably sub $2,500, which is maybe just a couple years away, that'll be the right target price point for a lot of people to go, I really want that thing. Plus, it'll go through a lot of iteration, and they'll get rid of some of the soft spots, like an external battery doesn't really make any sense, and some of the form factor stuff doesn't make any sense. But they'll figure all that out.
But a Toyota, a workhorse Toyota that gets a lot of things going at a price point for a lot of people, may be something that Mark's happy with, right?
Yeah, and really should be happy with. It's a good aspiration to be the thing that a lot of people can adopt and use and find great functionality with, which is, it's the Quest is for sure one of my go-to devices for many things, so.
And will the Quest 3 now be the go-to? It'll display.
I think so. Yeah, it'll replace my Quest 2 pretty quickly.
Tough question. Would you use the HTC Vive Pros, or any of the more exotic VR systems? Some of them cost.
I use them all because I use them all because I work in this industry, and we're looking at theme park applications and different bespoke uses for them. So I'm sort of in that like odd little micro bunch of people that use everything because it's my job. But I think in terms of just what Zuckerberg and team have done to own the space, for the most part, is the Quest has market traction, and the rest of them have very minor market traction right now. And even the Quest is still considered minor market traction when it comes to actually the numbers they sell. But in the millions,
one's probably going to hit. Yeah, I think the Quest 3 may hit tens of millions, maybe.
Yeah.
Which will not be bad for the whole sector, right?
Yeah. Let's do 2 or 3 minutes on Epic. And I know people want to get on with their day and listen to other podcasts or whatever. This week was really interesting. As many people know in tracking our industry, Epic did a fairly significant layoff. Tim Sweeney, we had some, very interesting kind of closed door meetings and discussions with him about where we all go. But the public part was, during the big keynote, he was up on stage talking from the heart, and it was pretty genuine. He's a pretty genuine guy when he explained what was going on. And, he talked about can sort of drop some little nuggets about his continued struggle with Apple and Android and their cuts in the ecosystems. But beyond that, the rest of the week was this incredibly positive energy of a number of thousand of developers all around the world working in all these different verticals, showing off amazing things, driving things in real time. Announcements around the Fortnite engine and their next gen sort of work on platforming and partnerships, and it's great. And there's tons and tons of stuff on Epic does really good with online documentation. So all the sessions are recorded and they're free to watch for anybody, and they'll publish them all, and anything that you find interesting, you can get a lot of information. But it was a pretty good week. I mean, they are a force to be reckoned with. One of the things that sort of Tim talked about was with the success pre-pandemic of Epic Games as a company that was making hundreds of millions of dollars of profit and very healthy with, I don't know, sub 1,000 employees, and then just meteoric growth with Fortnite, and the success of Fortnite went to like 6,000 plus employees, and massive success, and then turned into a multi-billion-dollar company, took investment from Sony and Tencent and all these other things, and sort of learned a pretty interesting lesson about growing too fast and trying to keep up with meteoric growth and not being able to really manage it. And this is just their first attempt at trying to manage it a little bit. So I would watch, the keynote and what's public, and take it from the horse's mouth. Don't take it from me. Watch what he says and see if you think he's pretty genuine about what he's doing. I don't think he's hiding anything. I think he's very much saying what's going on in their world.
No, Ted, that's a great assessment, and I know Tim. He is a genuine guy who's having to run a complex company and make very hard decisions as a CEO. I think the only thing I would add to that discussion for for our audience to think about are both Epic and Unity, who've been suffering turbulence, but so many people depend on them. You've got, I would say, two subscale, very important companies. Subscale relative to Amazon and Google and Apple,
Sure.
where as the market bumps and things happen, these companies feel it way more intensely. They have no cushion in the sense that the very large companies have cushion. And are we going to see a point where, can these companies at that mid-size scale, which I think is the worst place to be? You either need to be big, like Apple or Amazon, or you should be really small.
Yeah. And
But
Epic
the
is a
in
private company
between,
too, right? So it's interesting. Epic is private, and
private and medium size is like tough,
it's really
right?
tough.
Because you don't have the cushion to absorb, but you're a target for the big guys. And this kind of middle of the road, I think, is like a weird place to be.
Yeah.
It sounds strange to say a company that might be worth 10, 20, 30 billion is middle of the road. But, at some point they need to be part of somebody big, or shrink back to where they're really tight and lean and boutique, and you could survive all sorts of things.
Right.
But I always found the in-between size was the worst.
Mm-hmm.
The worst place to be, because you're not big enough to have the scale and cushion, and you're not small and lean where you could be very flexible and withstand these things. So,
Right.
and I think both Unity, we saw the turbulence with them, and this turbulence with Epic. They're both examples of that. I wonder what's going to happen. Like maybe Epic has to go public. Maybe they got to get rolled up. Who knows?
Well,
It's gonna
they've
be
certainly
interesting.
been taking external investment. And of course, one of the things that if you watch these sessions and learn or know a lot about Epic's culture, they're very creator oriented. They want creators to make money on their platform, and they do a lot to give back into that in terms of like effectively giving the software away to pretty much anybody that wants to use it. And then once you reach a certain threshold of monetary success, they get a 5% cut of the action, right?
Yes.
And that's been their model. It's quite a successful model. But Fortnite, as their own product, selling skins and driving that, has become a multi-billion-dollar business for them. When the rest of it is not a multi-billion-dollar business, but really important to an entire ecosystem of creators that rely on it, including a lot of big movie studios that rely on it to use things. So, we're working to kind of figure out the best business model to make sure they survive. It's very interesting when you look at a company like Epic or Unity or other companies that are in that sort of zone. If we lose them, we all suffer, right? So, and the goal is to make sure that they can stay solvent and valuable. And that's
Well, Ted, they remind me of like cool, great companies that people really love, like Lucasfilm or Marvel or Pixar, that at some point needed to become part of a Disney or something like that in order to have
sure.
the next decades of life. Where it's ultimately hard and somewhat unstable to survive that long as a smaller boutique thing. And
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because that magic number is kind of like where Epic kind of might be right now in their actual valuation. Maybe not their, like if they go public, their valuation would explode, but 5-6 billion is probably the price tag, just like Pixar and Lucas were in that $5-ish billion range is what Iger picked them up for. And clearly those seemed like pretty good decisions. And
They do. I mean, you're at Paramount, but they do feel like an Epic inside a Disney or Disney-like entity would start to make some sense because it would provide the technology and know-how to one of these sort of groups. Like but I don't see them as part of, let's say, an Amazon or something. Like the Epic's culture.
I mean, Amazon tried this with Lumberyard. If you go back in time, remember they bought an engine, turned it into Lumberyard, didn't really go anywhere. So it's interesting.
But we'll see. I mean, look, it's a company people love, and I think people really wanted to see it be around for a long time. And
I agree.
Good. Anyway, great. Charlie, we miss you. Ted,
we miss you.
Yes. You want to bring us home?
Sure. So we went a little over our 45-minute target time, but all good. Thank you for everybody around the world that's listening to us. We'll be back again next week. I think Charlie may still be on vacation, so that's good. But we're many hundreds of shows now, well over 150 shows. Wow. And as long as you keep listening, we'll commit the time to keep doing this discussion. And feel free to send us any notes or any comments. We'd like to hear if you think we're heading in the right direction in these kind of in-depth discussions of the week's events and some things that matter or important to you all. So thank you all for watching and listening, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks, Rony.
Thank you, everyone.